Hello, good afternoon, and welcome. Welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. And I should also say Merry Christmas. I'm your host, Atlas Alex, and today we are going to be looking at Christmas once again, as we do every year at this time of year. And I'm also going to be offering a bit of a Christmas message. I sometimes write these, but I think this year it's just better if it comes from the heart, straight up. And we'll get to that. But first, recently, I encountered a post on Facebook where someone was making the point about how long before Christians walked the earth, Christmas was being celebrated all over the world. That almost all ancient cultures, whatever their beliefs might have been, they celebrated this time of year. And it's important to know why that is. And of course, Christmas falls on the winter solstice, which is the period of time where we shift from the shortest days to them slowly becoming longer again. And you can see this represented in this graphic here. And so the winter solstice represents a kind of birth or a shift. Now, many have pointed this out, and many have also made other references and pointed out other traditions that we relate to Christmas in this day and age, but that were practiced or were aspects of ancient civilizations, cultures, traditions. For example, the Christmas tree. It's been pointed out that the illuminated Christmas tree at Christmas time has origins in pagan mythology and Celtic practices and Germanic practices, in Nordic practices. So there is always this impulse, particularly on the part of non-Christians, but also on the part of those Christians who are very skeptical of Catholicism, for example, and they're skeptical of Protestantism and any sort of organized Christianity. They want their Christianity to be more open and fluid and personal and mystical, esoteric, if you will. And so they're constantly pointing out, or they're trying to point out, that Christianity appropriated these symbols from other cultures and appropriated the worship of the birth of Christ on the winter solstice. And very often they will turn to this fact that cultures and traditions from all over the world celebrated not just the winter solstice, but also the vernal equinox, which of course in Christianity and Catholicism it relates to Easter, which is during which time we celebrate the death and resurrection of Christ. And there's a concerted effort to try to make this point as though it is devaluing in some way, or devalidating, if that's the right expression, Christianity's apparent or attempted or allegedly attempted monopoly over Christmas. We can point to Kwanzaa, we can point to Hanukkah. There are other traditions that take place during these so-called holidays. And many Christians become fervently upset and defensive. And when people refer to Christmas in any other way than Christmas, they don't like it being called the holidays, despite the fact that holiday means holy day. They don't like that. They want to see the Christ back in Christmas. And they especially don't like it being called Xmas, despite the fact that X is a cross, which we have explored many times in many different ways. The reality is that both these camps, on the one hand, those who want to argue that there's nothing special or unique about Christians and their Christmas, and that this time of year, it really just relates to the winter solstice and is worshipped all over the world with rites and rituals and celebrations and so on and so forth. To the hardened, fervent Christians and Catholics who say, no, 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 no. This is Christmas. It's always been Christmas. And this is what we celebrate and nothing else. The irony is that both camps are correct and both are incorrect at the same time. And you might wonder how that's possible. And it's possible because of the relative ignorance of the two camps. Those who claim that Christmas was never Christmas, or that Christmas was celebrated in other ways and other forms for other reasons long before Christ was even born, well, they're correct. Where they're incorrect is the notion that those other traditions and cultures and religions and civilizations were worshiping anything other than the Christ. Likewise, the Christians who are fervent and adamant that Christmas was always about the Christ, well, they're correct. It was, even before Jesus was born. But they don't know that because they equate the Christ with Jesus. They think that Christ is a man, Jesus, the man, who came 2,000 years ago, was born, lived, suffered, died, and rose again. That is for them what Christ means, and that's the Christ they want in Christmas. Jesus Christ. That's their ignorance. And likewise, the other camp has the same ignorance. They likewise also believe that Christ is just Jesus. Therefore, this time of year must be about something other than the Christ because it was celebrated long before the man ever lived. But neither of these camps understand fully and completely the objective truth that Christ is not a person. Christ is a force in the universe. And that force is embodied, first and foremost, in the physical plane in our solar system the manifestation and embodiment of the Christ, is the Son. The Son is the body of a cosmo-creator named Jehovah Elohim. And the capacity and ability of the Son to generate the power and energy that it does to sustain an entire solar system, including our planet and everything that's alive on our planet, is the intensity and the force and the power of the cosmic Christ. So no one in their original mystical practices of their ancient religions or traditions, no one ever worshipped the sun. They were not worshiping the sun, which is literally the body of Christ. They were worshiping Christ. And on the winter solstice, the Christ becomes the days start getting longer. So it's a representation of light overcoming darkness. But that's the fact that all great religions and spiritual traditions throughout all time all worship the Christ in one form or another, and by many, many different names. And in some religions, like Hinduism, the Christ is represented multiple different ways. We have Vishnu, we have Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, but we also have Krishna. And both Vishnu and Krishna are embodiments of that same divine force. Krishna is more of a Jesus-like figure, more of a personification of the force, also personified by Vishnu, the second logos. And we can turn to The Perfect Matrimony, written by Samael Bayor. And these words that come from that particular book, written on the topic of the Christ. He says, Christ was worshipped in the mysteries of Mithra, Apollo, Aphrodite, Jupiter, Janus, Vesta, Bacchus, Astarte, Demeter, Quetzalcoatl, etc. The Christic principle has never been absent from any religion. I'll make that even bigger. All religions are one. Religion is as inherent to life as humidity is to water. The great cosmic universal religion becomes modified into thousands of religious forms. Thus, the priests from all religious forms are completely identifiable with one another through the fundamental principles of the great cosmic universal religion. Therefore, a basic difference between the Mohammedan priest and the Jewish priest, or between the pagan priest and the legitimate Christian one, does not exist. Religion is one. Religion is unique and absolutely universal. The ceremonies of the Shinto priest of Japan or of the Mongol lamas are similar to those ceremonies of the shamans and sorcerers from Africa and Oceania. The adorable, and this is at the beginning of this very passage, the adorable God Christos, Christ, comes from the archaic cults of the fire god. The letters P, pyre, and X, cross, are the hieroglyph which represent the generation of the sacred fire. And not long ago, when I made my video for Human 3.0, obviously I incorporated that symbol, the Chi Rho, or the Pax Romana, into that presentation. And it's also the rune Otala, and I showed in my video how that is so, because the Christic forces are very active right now on this planet in the Kali Yuga, and the Christ is the power of death and rebirth. That is the fire. That's the fire of the phoenix, right? It's the fire that burns and dissolves, is also the fire that crystallizes and fuses together, right? We have both fission and fusion. So the fire is the creative fire, and the Christ embodies all of that. And so we look at the fusion energy of the sun, we look at all the energy that the sun is capable of generating, and that it sustains life itself on the planet. But it's the Christ that does that. It's the creative force. The divine androgen, which is both masculine and feminine in union. So it's the law of three. And as such, this was known to all mystics throughout all time. And the religions born of their experiential knowledge, embodied in symbol and allegory, these fundamental truths of the nature of Christ. And that is what was worshipped when we look at things like the seasons and the changing day and the relationship between the earth and the sun. So, but this is way over the heads of most historians and anthropologists and theologians, who just, they look at these so-called primitives and they say, oh, well, they were sun worshippers. And they worshiped the sun. They said the sun was their God. Well, the sun is our God, because the sun is a living, breathing embodiment of the Christ. Without it, we wouldn't exist. No life in the solar system could exist without the sun. And this is true for all solar systems throughout the universe. And that's why when you look up in the sky and you see all those stars, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at the physical body of reincarnated cosmo-creators who reincarnate as the body of a planet, the body of a star, and sustain an entire cosmic family. And it is not by accident, then, that when we look at a nativity scene, for example, we observe the nativity scene, and at the center of that scene is always the Christ. In the same way that the center of our solar system is our sun, and the center of our galaxy is that mega cluster of stars, at which is a supermassive star that whose cosmo creator is named Oremus. But this is the Holy Family. And at the center of every family is the Christ, because it is what defines a family are its children. A husband and wife beginning a family, that's the whole definition of a family, is that man and woman unite in holy matrimony to create a child. Now, that's in contemporary, just regular terms that everybody can relate to. But in esoteric terms, a man and a woman unite in holy matrimony what Master Samael calls the perfect matrimony, also to create And the child that they're creating is the Christ within themselves, which in us is just a seed, a spark. It needs to be nurtured. It needs to be cultivated. It needs to be born within us. So that requires the perfect matrimony between ourselves and our spouse, but also the matrimony between our own individual holy family. We have the 12 individuated aspects of our being. We have our mind, our heart, and our body. We have our innermost being and our divine mother, and our human soul. These are all reflected on the tree of life in different sephira, to one degree or another. But the reality is all these must become whole and pure in order to provide the perfect nurturing space in which our innermost intimate Christ can be born, so that our innermost intimate Christ can come into the world. This is all part of that nativity scene that we are all familiar with. Because the three kings are the mind, the heart, and the body. And they bring their gifts to the newborn Christ. So the capacities, the abilities, the capabilities, and the energies of our three brains, the mental body, the emotional body, and the motor instinctive sexual body, the wise men, those who are kings over their world in microcosm, if we are wise and if we become masters and rulers of our mind, heart, and body, we too, like the three wise men, bring our gifts to the newborn Christ, who again is just a seed, a spark within us. It must be born within us. Now, the flip side of all of this birth, of course, is death, the death of the false self, the death of the mere mortal. But as you know, that takes place during Easter, during the vernal equinox. And well, that's a whole different conversation. That's a whole different festival. That's why it's separate for a reason. But Christmas is celebrating the birth of that innermost intimate Christ, and it takes place in a manger, because the innermost intimate Christ is born within us, surrounded by the animal egos of our false self. And the innermost intimate Christ is born only through radical humility. There is no place in the inn for Mary and Joseph. There is no place in the space of comfort and security, or opulence, or decadence. The Christ cannot be born under such circumstances. The other aspect of the nativity that is most often relayed is the Immaculate Conception, the conception of Christ in Mary through the power of the Holy Spirit. That too is metaphysically and esoterically correct from a metaphysical scientific point of view. Unfortunately, those who read the Bible literally, and those who have accepted the dogmatic teachings of the various Christian churches, they, generally speaking, agree that Mary was a virgin and that she was um, that Jesus was conceived by the power of the Holy Spirit. That's certainly the Catholic view. Now, I think Protestant, there are certain other, I can't keep all of my Christian sects in order in my mind. So I can't remember, it's the Protestants who don't believe in the virgin birth, or the Baptists, or who it is. But I know that there are certain Christian sects that argue. I think this was one of the reasons why the Great Schism occurred, or not the Great Schism, but the separation of the Protestants from Catholicism, and that schism. That this was one of the points of contention. But all of this is a misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding and confusion over the word virgin and immaculate. Immaculately means clean, without blemish. Immaculate means perfect. And a perfect conception of Christ does happen under the watchful eye and the grace of the Holy Spirit, and who is the Divine Mother, who is the husband of the Divine Mother. The Holy Spirit is the divine masculine counterpart to the divine feminine. So an angel could certainly herald an immaculate conception, announce to Mary that she is pregnant. And the conception itself could have occurred under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, because all immaculate conception takes place thus. But to say that immaculate conception could occur without coitus is just flying in the face of science and logic. Because the Catholic Church and other Christian sects, the people who argue over this matter, they're unaware of the practice of white tantra. They're unaware of the practice of sexual alchemy. They're unaware of the importance of said practice. And indeed, it was kept secret for many centuries for important reasons. But the importance of understanding that for us is paramount, because practicing sexual alchemy does not preclude having a family. As a matter of fact, in a very similar way, a couple practicing sexual alchemy and refraining from orgasm, transmuting the sexual force, can very easily conceive a child. And likewise, that child will be conceived via immaculate conception, because it only requires one sperm to fecundate an egg. To fertilize an egg, you need one sperm, not a billion sperm. And ask any Catholic who has practiced the Catholic Church's recommended method of birth control, which is the pull-out method. Ask those Catholics who have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 children, and they have all those children. Meanwhile, they've been practicing the pull-out method of birth control. Well, what that means is that during the act of coitus, one sperm escaped and made its way to fertilize the egg inside the woman, and she became pregnant. And that is a real possibility for Gnostics practicing sexual alchemy. If they are meant to be parents, and if they are meant to have a child together, then the Holy Spirit will make that happen. So, Immaculate Conception simply means that Mary and Joseph were practicing white tantra. They would have been instructed on that practice. They may have been instructed by their own innermost, or they may have been instructed by an angel, or but whatever under whatever circumstances, they received instruction, divine instruction, and they fulfilled their role in order to enable the immaculate conception of the man we know, the man we call Jesus, who later became Christified, became a Christified master through a long and arduous process of suffering and sacrifice for humanity. But again, that process is really one that we talk about at Easter time. So there are other symbols, for example, that we mentioned, the Christmas tree. And people say, well, the Christmas tree was worshipped in Norse mythology and Germanic mythology, Celtic mythology, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The Christmas tree is a pagan symbol and nature worship and so on and so forth. Well, the Christmas tree is the tree of life. And you can very easily see why the Christmas tree is adorned the way it is and with what. And, you know, it's hard to believe that people actually did this, but in the past, people would actually put candles, lit candles, on their Christmas trees. Suffice it to say, many villages and cities burned down as a result of this practice, but the relationship between candles and the Christmas tree is also the menorah. And the menorah has 9 candles representing, again, the 9 sephira of the tree of life, beginning with the 9th sphere. So it's, or finishing with the 9th sphere. And the Christmas decorations, the balls hanging on the tree, are the sephira, and then the garland going around the tree represents the Christ, the ray of Akidonok, that descends down the tree of life in that signature zigzag pattern that is exactly how the garland looks as it's coiling down, wrapped around a Christmas tree, which also happens to be a spiral pattern of the Alm of Life. And the gifts at the base of the tree are precisely the gifts that we possess, that we sacrifice, that we bring, that we give. If we are wise men, these are the gifts that we furnish upon the innermost intimate Christ. And the pentagram, the upright pentagram, the star at the top of the tree, the upright human being, the pentagram, and the absolute. A lesser known, well, an equally as well-known symbol, Santa Claus. People say, well, it's, you know, based on Saint Nicholas or Krampus or so on and so forth. People have all sorts of origin stories for Santa Claus. Interestingly, Master Samael pointed out that it's the relationship between Santa Claus and his location in the rest of the world, but that Santa Claus exists at the North Pole, and that at Christmas time he descends from the North Pole to the rest of the world, and he brings to the world gifts from the North Pole. And his colors are red, white, and black. Master Samael writes about this, and he points out that it was not only the Europeans who had a figure whose colors were red, black, and white that they worshipped at this time of year. The Aztecs celebrated this event in ancient times. And their figure they called Quetzalcoatl, or I always have trouble pronouncing this, Ometacutli, and many other names, according to their relationship with the forces of nature. And it's these colors that are associated, once again, with the Christic force. And he writes, in order to invoke those forces of the north, during special rituals, they burned powder made from corals or seashells, mainly with the colors red, white, and black, which are the main colors that appear in the vesture of Santa Claus. Red, white, and black represent the different activities of, of that solar energy when it enters through the North Pole. The red is the living energy of the sun. The white is the purity, the intelligence, or that solar force. The black symbolizes when that energy enters into the hydrogen, into the carbon, into any element of the earth. It becomes black, meaning that it is enclosed, like in the charcoal. But when you light a charcoal, then that solar light is liberated, and you call it fire. So that fire, that solar light, is within the air, within the water, within the earth, within all the elements. This is what we call Christ. The main source is the North Pole, through which it descends into this matter, which is a Latin word for mother, Mother Earth. Matter really is. Matter is mater, mater, M-A-T-E-R, and it means mother. And it's just interesting that there's another figure from our mythology who likewise descends from the North Pole. Let's see if I can. Yeah, okay, we'll do this. $11? Yeah, okay. This is the poster for the upcoming Superman movie by James Gunn. Their DC is trying to reboot the Superman franchise again. Now his colors aren't red, white, and black, but they are red, yellow, and blue. And at different times throughout Superman's history, he has had both a white suit and a black suit. But the color red always plays an important part. And I point out that both in Quetzalcoatl and Santa Claus, the color of gold also plays an important role, because Santa Claus has a gold belt, golden belt buckle, and Quetzalcoatl has the yellow as well. And yellow being gold, yellow being the color of the sun. But the fact that Superman also resides at the North Pole in his so-called Fortress of Solitude, and he descends from the North Pole to assist humanity with its struggles. There is something about these people, these personalities, these characters descending from the North Pole, and they're embodying pure selflessness. that it really does relate to the spirit of Christmas, the spirit of giving. It's really the Christic force, the Christic impulse. It is God, who is the pure ultimate essence of selflessness. No self, as the Buddhists would describe it. Because for the Buddhists, there is no God. There is no self. There's pure selflessness. And pure selflessness, that's the impulse to give. But that impulse must be embodied. That impulse must be energized, activated, must be put into activity. The selflessness is the foundation. But the activation, the manifestation, the expression of that selflessness, that is the Christ. Right? One cannot launch without a foundation. But the foundation must remain. You build upon that foundation. So something, a tree thrusts into the air from the ground, but its foundations are rooted firmly in the earth. But it thrusts up into the sky and it branches out from there. I recently watched a video on YouTube that was describing the 20 largest trees in the world, and it's quite phenomenal. Looking at some of these giant sequoias and baobab trees and other trees, it was a fascinating. It's like a 20-minute, 30-minute video, 40, maybe even 40 minutes, but it's 20 trees that they were looking at, the largest trees, and they were looking at trees from the standpoint of height, but also breadth, width, like just sheer scale. There's many different ways you can measure the scale and size of a tree. It wasn't just the tallest trees, although they also made the list, obviously. And it wasn't only the oldest trees, but they too made the list, obviously. And but a tree is only as strong as its foundation. And the Christ in activity emanates from that source, that origin, that foundation that we call God, that pure essence of selflessness, that no self, that creates the entire universe. And it is that essence of selflessness that is embodied in what we experience as the spirit of giving. The spirit of giving, which we find, right, embodied in our rituals and rites around this time of year, that is embodied in these personages, including Santa Claus and Quetzalcoatl, but also Superman, of giving of ourselves, of sacrifice. And this is what we call the spirit of giving, or the spirit of the season. And sure, also embodied in the nativity story itself, with the three kings and their gifts that they bring to the Christ: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Right? The heart, mind, and body. These are what the newborn Christ within us, the fledgling intimate Christ within us requires in order to be brought into the world via the faculties of our mind, the faculties of our heart, and the vessel, the vehicle of our body, our physical body. And so all of these symbols transcend any one religion. They transcend any one tradition. The tree of life being universal, the spirit of giving is universal. And the importance of that life-giving fire within all of matter itself, and matter meaning mother. So really the Divine Mother is just the feminine physical expression or embodiment of that Christic force. And why we always are encouraged in our practice of self-observation to also remember ourselves, remember our Divine Mother, because it is she who furnishes us with all we need in our life and all we need on the path. If there was one aspect of our being which embodied the spirit of Christmas each and every day of our lives, that would be our Divine Mother. And the ninth sphere of the tree of life is known as Yesod. It's also called the foundation, the fourth dimension, and that is where the Divine Mother Kundalini resides, and that is where our prana, our vital body, the foundation of our physical body exists. And it is from that foundation that we practice sexual alchemy and the transmutation, the transformation of impressions, the transmutation of the sexual force, in order to illuminate our tree and become an illuminated, enlightened tree of life, and have that energy rise up in Adam, up in Adam. And I've gone over this many, many times, many different ways. But all of this is encoded and encapsulated and captured within the various different stories and myths and rituals and rites and traditions around these symbols around this time of year. And if you are so inclined, there is an entire article written by Samael Anwayor, which is on the glorian.org website. And let me just wow, that's a huge link. I'm not even sure if it's worthwhile putting that on the screen. That's an enormous. You're not going to type that out, but it's in the chat. You might be able to cut and paste it from the chat. So it's Alchemical Symbolism of the Nativity of the Christ, written by Samael Anwayor. And this is where I pulled this diagram from, and it gets into all the different ways that the symbols of the Christ, and this would take a long time just to go through reading this all, but you see the length of this particular article. I think you can appreciate just how deep this well goes, And if you wish to go down that rabbit hole, it will take you very, very far indeed. Master Samael was obviously this was his work. This was his purpose, to be able to make these connections with the breadth and scope and depth that he does. So the link is in the chat, and it's probably easier or better to find this just by going to Glorian and go to courses and lectures by Samael Envoyor. Right? So here you can see across the top here, right? Let me make this bigger so you can see it even better. So from the home screen, you go to Learn, Courses and Lectures by Samael Envoyor, and just scroll down until you see, here it is, Alchemical Symbolism of the Nativity of the Christ. In fact, I bet you maybe I can't do that. Okay. Yeah, here. Whoops. Copy. Okay. In fact, now I put that link in the chat, and that one I will throw up on screen because it's a lot shorter. If it'll go up on screen. Okay, so there it is. So it's glorian.org/learn/courses and lectures by Samael Envoyor /alchemical symbolism of the Nativity of Christ. I leave this with you to look at on your own time, because it would take us probably 2 hours just to get through this, just to go through it. Speaking of comments in the comment section, Tiffany says, "Good day. I can't attend today, but I'm wholeheartedly wishing you and everyone a very blessed holiday. Everything celebrated. Big hugs, everyone. Enjoy." Well, thank you for those kind words and well wishes, Tiffany. We're sorry that you couldn't be with us live, but I have a feeling you're going to be catching this on a replay. So very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to you and yours as well. Now, speaking of, it is customary at this time of year, and this is a custom that I suppose Master Samael himself began, certainly for the modern Gnostic movement, the Christian Gnostic movement, to deliver what he called a Christmas message. And since his disincarnation, this is something that has been carried on by his followers and other Gnostics, that because Christmas does represent a special time, it's a time of giving, but it's also a time of reflection. It's a time of taking stock of ourselves and preparing for the upcoming year. 2024 was a bit of a, how does one describe it? A bit of a non-year. It was very uneventful. Now, you might argue, well, there's a war going on in Europe, and there's a conflict in the Middle East, and there was political upheaval, there was a presidential election, that there really was a lot going on. But when I say it was a non-year, it was very uneventful. if you reflect on the events of this past year, they're not, they're, everything felt very generic. Everything felt very, it was just, business as usual for this humanity. It was nothing, there was nothing extraordinary about any of it. And I suppose my message to you on this Christmas is that's about to change. 2025 is going to stand in stark contrast to 2024. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have more wars. We might. Or that the wars that are going on might end, because that might happen as well. And certainly it looks like here in Canada, we're going to have an election. At the very least, one way or another, our present Prime Minister, Pierre Trudeau, is going to step down or is going to be defeated, is going to be removed from Parliament, one way or another. Even if that requires some kind of a constitutional process. Because if he tries to hold on to power, it's going to be a scandal unlike any in Canadian history. But it's the first indication, and there have been other indications across Europe and elsewhere around the world that the fabric of things is beginning to unwind, unravel. It is probably best if we begin preparing ourselves psychologically for more eventful times. I feel it is very likely that we won't have another year like 2024 for quite some time, if ever. A year where, yes, there were conflicts and yes, there were events, but honestly, when you contemplate and meditate on those events from this past year, are you not left with like the color gray? But I feel that 2025 is going to be a much more colorful year, and that the years moving forward are likewise going to be much more colorful for this humanity. Colorful, eventful. So how does one prepare for what the Chinese would call interesting times, and what others call the end times or the Kali Yuga, because the changes are coming. And during the end times, those changes are decidedly destructive or dismantling. They represent the unraveling of all that we know and love and hold dear and cling to, and that define us, that define our society, our civilization. Nothing that was made by the hand of man survives forever, and therefore nothing that we currently possess or are possessed by or shelter beneath or stand on the foundation of that was made by man is guaranteed to endure. Nothing. That is an absolute certainty that we can hold onto as we move into this period of great uncertainty, is that nothing is certain. The one thing is certain is that nothing is certain. The one thing that we can be sure of is that none of the structures or infrastructures that presently uphold the so-called global civilization, none of that is guaranteed to survive, is guaranteed to endure. This includes anything and everything from the global financial system, the globalized trade infrastructure, to governance, nationally, internationally, locally, right down to communication technology, such as the internet. There's no guarantee that the internet is going to keep working, or for how long, or in what manner. So much of our lives that we take for granted depend upon technology and infrastructure and bureaucracy and organizational efficiency, the energy grid. Let's not even if we lost the internet tomorrow, imagine if we lost the grid tomorrow. And then imagine if global supply lines were disrupted and the grid went down. Now, even if you live in a cabin out in the woods off grid and you have a solar panel and geothermal and you got all kinds of like backup wood and everything to stay warm in the winter, that's fine for you. But how long is it going to be? No matter how isolated you are, how long will it be before the neighbors come to ransack your place, to take your firewood and to take your solar panel and to take your whatever it is that you've accumulated in your off-grid sanctuary up in the mountains or out in the desert or on an island somewhere in a bunker? Because that's that's where many of the global elite are building their refuges and will be seeking refuge. But is that really what's the priority for us? And there's no guarantee that that level of disruption is going to be happening next year, for instance. It could be that it's decades or centuries before humanity has to deal with that level of disruption, that level of destruction. But if that threat exists and is held over us, is hanging over us like the proverbial sword of Damocles. What is it trying to teach us, that threat? Just connecting with yourself, your innermost. Just feeling into why you are even here, watching this, listening to this. Just feeling into that, saying, why am I here? Why am I really here? What then is the threat of destruction, the threat of loss, the threat of the dissolution, dismantling, dismemberment of the organizational infrastructure that presently gives us the framework in which we enjoy our present state of comfort and security. Where that framework now, it could last a year, could last 10 years, could last 100 years, but we know it will not last. That it's built on a foundation of sand, and the winds of change and the currents of change are already flowing. And you know that sand is susceptible to both wind and water. And we know that those winds of change are blowing. The currents of change are flowing. We live in Aquarius. Aquarius began in 1968. We are already in the age of Aquarius, which is the age of change. But we are also in the Kali Yuga of a humanity, which is more than just any old change, it's death. Master Samael famously said, you can learn very little from the phenomena of birth, but from death, you can learn everything. The structures, the infrastructure, the framework, the foundation itself of our civilization, of our humanity, is built on sand because it's man-made. And that which is made by men cannot endure, will not endure. Sure, we can go to Machu Picchu and we can look at incredible stone walls and structures and foundations made from impossibly large megaliths and impossibly massive and heavy megaliths. We can go to the Giza Plateau and marvel at the Great Pyramid. And now other pyramids elsewhere around the world, including in Europe, in Eastern Europe. And we can go to Mexico and marvel at the Great Pyramids of the Incas, or the Aztecs. And we can go to Guatemala and look at the pyramids of the Mayans. We can say, well, those are enduring. Well, but the civilizations are long gone. We can marvel at the statues of the Maui in the Pacific because they're enormous, and we can, these enormous stones, well, they last, they endure for a long time, but their civilizations are long gone. just as ours will be, sooner or later. So what is there for us to do? What is our response to the knowledge, to the intuition, to the foresight and insight that we have that everything is starting to come apart at the seams? And if you haven't felt that yet, you really haven't been paying attention. Because if you pay attention, you'll see it everywhere. And one of the ways that we can see it most clearly is the so-called popular culture in the West that is now pervading and spreading its influence all over the world. So now you have, Bollywood movies and movies out of China and elsewhere around the world mimicking the Hollywood formula of movie making. But Hollywood itself seems completely bereft of original ideas. And it's so afraid, it's so risk averse that it can only do remakes and remasters and we're just regurgitating. Now, Hollywood has always done this. You know how many versions of the Mutiny on the Bounty there are? And I just heard a rumor that there's a new Lord of the Rings trilogy in the works. The first Lord of the Rings trilogy is probably the greatest trilogy in cinematic history. It's only about 20 years old. But that seems to be the cutoff, or that seems to be the threshold for Hollywood to start remaking things. So word is there's a new Lord of the Rings trilogy in play. Star Wars has been run into the ground by Disney. Star Trek as well has been run into the ground by Paramount and J.J. Abrams. I am very challenged to find movies which embody much in the way of timeless universal truths. It's very difficult and challenging to find new movies being released that I'm drawn to in a meaningful way on an archetypal level. I mean, just recently, they made a sequel to Gladiator, as if Gladiator needed a sequel. But a film that is so derivative, so unnecessary, and so bereft of any truth that Gladiator, one of my favorite films of all time and one of the most profound esoteric films made in my lifetime, they made a sequel to it, which I was told not even to go see. Not one iota of my being has any sort of longing or sense of urgency to go see Gladiator 2. Even though it was produced by Ridley Scott, the same person who directed the first Gladiator film. A film that I saw in the theater at least 3 times in the theater, the first Gladiator. And since then, probably about 20, 30 times. But I will not go see Gladiator 2, not even once. Because there's no point. Because for me, Gladiator 1 was not a spectacle film. It was a film of divinely inspired archetypal truths, universal truths. I wrote an entire article on Gladiator, and I even I had multiple trees of life. Multiple trees of life inspired by the Gladiator film. Here's one where all the different characters from the film map perfectly onto the tree of life. But it wasn't just the characters of the film. It was also, if this thing would open, well, let's try this one. It was also the locations. All the different locations of the film map perfectly onto the tree of life. Yeah, so Windows decided to open it 3 times. Okay. I think that's the better one. So we have a popular culture. Benjamin says, yeah, it was whatever. Didn't like Gladiator 2. There's nothing to like about it. There's nothing to love about it. Because it's devoid. It was a money grab. It was a cynical, mechanical, corporate business decision. It was not an inspired vision. And just meditate on those words. Inspired vision. How much inspired vision are you encountering in your life these days? Where you feel as though you're being touched by the inspired vision of others. And in the face of that, what is your takeaway? What is your lesson? We have a culture, a society, but even more so, a humanity that is running out of steam. It's running out of its energy, its enthusiasm, its life force. And it's certainly running out of inspired vision, even to the point of developing this AI technology, which is entirely degenerative and derivative in nature. It's just taking that which was done in the past and repackaging and repurposing it. It's the same thing that corporations have been doing for a while. But a culture, a civilization that's exhausted, that's run its course. It lacks that vitality, that fire. Any of us who are getting on in years, we certainly feel this in certain aspects of our life. physically, mentally, emotionally. There's only so many hours in the day, and only so many of those hours that we can be truly productive and energized and active. We get tired more easily, more quickly. And depending on our age, it only gets worse the older we get. That's what old age is. And old age is leading us somewhere. And civilization coming apart at the seams and beginning to break down and beginning to slow down. It's leading us somewhere. It's leading towards an inevitability. So I ask you again, what is that inevitability? And what is it trying to teach us? What is the correct response when we are facing the end of all that we know and all that has gotten to where we are and all that upholds who and what we are? For my part, I made a commitment long ago that I would do whatever it was I could in order to help this humanity in facing this inevitability that I knew we were going to have to face. And it's taken 50 years of preparation and of waiting, of patience. But now that time is here. That time has come. 2025 is going to mark the beginning of something, the beginning of the end. Even though you might argue that the end has already begun and so on and so forth, it's 2024 was enough of a non-year that more significant changes, more memorable, more notable dismantling waits ahead of us. And I feel as though 2025 is going to usher in or begin ushering in some of these more significant, more notable, more arresting changes. Things that will grab people's attention in ways that the war in Ukraine or the events in the Middle East haven't yet. And already, if you've been paying attention, there are drones flying around the United States that are causing a great deal of speculation on the part of a great many people. So already strange occurrences are beginning to take place, and we're not even in 2025 yet. It seems almost as though it's like a prelude or a sneak peek at what 2025 might be bringing us. But what is all of this asking of us? What is all of this driving us towards or encouraging us to do? Because surely the talk of death, the talk of destruction, the talk of dismantling, thinking about the loss of your job, your house, your car, your livelihood, your electricity, your ability to buy food for your family. Surely all of that must be there to discourage you, because surely all of that is discouraging. It's a discouraging thought, is it not? That we're all going to grow old and die. Surely that's discouraging, isn't it? And isn't the destruction of a humanity, the loss of a civilization, the fall of a civilization, surely that's discouraging as well, especially when you talk about the inevitability of it all. Well, surely that's discouraging too. And discourage means to not have courage. In addition to discourage someone, to not encourage them. To be discouraging means the opposite of to be encouraging. Like raining on their parade, like actively suggesting to them that they should not move forward, that they should not have any hope, that it's hopeless, that they shouldn't even bother to try, they should just give up. I mean, that's discouragement, right? Or yeah, like someone has a dream to be an actor on the stage in London or Broadway. And what do? You discourage them to do that because, oh, you're never going to be good enough, or oh, it's a very hard life, and oh, it's feast or famine, and you're going to have to wait tables on the side anyway, and it's and there's so many actors get burnt out very quickly, and they end up on drugs, or they end up on alcoholics, or so on and so forth, right? There's many different ways people can be discouraging towards you and discouraging towards others. But at its root, to be discouraging, the word itself means to not have courage, because the act of discouraging someone more often than not plays into the ego of fear. To discourage someone is to get them to give in to their fear, and to get them to side with their desire for comfort and security. And comfort and security, of course, is born of fear. The fear of discomfort, the fear of insecurity, or the insecurity that comes from discomfort, and the insecurity that comes from not having comfort and security. So it's easy to discourage someone playing off of their fear. Now, what is the greatest fear for all living things? Right? It's inherent, it's innate. You can't deny it. You have felt it at least once in your life. Everyone has. Every living thing has experienced at least once in their life this fear, because it's innate and it's fundamental. You cannot be alive, you cannot exist without having faced this fear at least once. It's the fear of death. All things that are alive want to stay alive at some point. And at some point, they have all experienced a set of circumstances, or perhaps a single moment, that put them into a state of jeopardy, that tapped into and was feeding off of the fear of death. Even if it wasn't literally that their life was being threatened. So, for example, perhaps your livelihood was under threat. Your company was laying off staff. and you were to find out on Friday from your supervisor or from your manager whether or not you were going to be among those employees being laid off or being let go. And perhaps you felt terrified of that. Well, you are not going to lose your life, but losing your livelihood for many people is almost as bad. Because how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to pay my mortgage? How am I going to pay my car? How am I going to buy food for my kids? So fear of death is universal and is at the foundation of many of our fears. And the prospect of losing all that we know and hold dear, and the prospect of losing the infrastructure on which our relatively comfortable and secure lives have been built, means that our lives, as we know it, are under threat. That's facing the fear of death. Because we're talking about death in macrocosm now. And as above, so below, as within, so without, as in macrocosm, so in microcosm. Yang Sheng asks the same question twice. He says, "Hi, Atlas. Is Christmas Jesus' real birthday? If not, can please tell us what is the connection of Jesus and Christmas Day? Thank you." I've already covered that, Yang Sheng, earlier in the live stream. So I've spent an hour talking about that. But since you missed the beginning of the live stream, I'll share with you this link again. So again, I talked about it, but you can read all about it in this article, and I'll share you the link here in the chat. You go to glorian.org and go to learn courses and lectures by Samael Anvayor, and the title you're looking for is Alchemical Symbolism of the Nativity of the Christ. There's the link on the screen, and it's also in the chat. Unfortunately, I can't go through it all again just for you, so you can either rewatch the beginning of today's video from the start, or you can read this article, and this article will answer all your questions. The fact of the matter is that when we face our own mortality, we face the greatest teacher that we have. None of us know when we're going to die. Just as I can't tell you how long this humanity has. And that fact should give us pause and should give us motivation to do the work, to be who we are, to be who we were meant to be. And that is what I encourage you to focus on moving forward. In response to the coming apart at the seams and the weakness and the fragility, the dismantling, the and all of the changes that are coming in 2025 and beyond. These aren't discouraging to a Gnostic. They shouldn't be discouraging. They're discouraging only if you consider material wealth and success and accumulation of things and land, and if you consider your comfort and security the most important things, or the survival of your physical self. But if what matters most to you is your eternal soul, if what matters most to you is who you truly are, then in the face of a ticking time bomb, in the face of a countdown timer, and you don't know how much time you have left, that fog of war encourages us to be and to get ourselves out of the way of ourselves in order to be. It's no longer about how successful we are or what we accumulate, or feeling like we're accomplished, or again, like we're successful, and it's more than just acknowledging our power and our deepest longing and our passion and purpose and meaning in life. It's more than that. It's more than that. Because none of that purpose and meaning, and even this physical body, this personality, none of this is guaranteed. In fact, all of this is certain not to survive. Even if you have purpose and meaning in your life, and even if as a result of you fulfilling that purpose and meaning, you get your name etched in stone, you get bridges named after you or hospitals named after you, it could be years, it could be decades from now, those hospitals will be razed to the ground along with your name. So it's not enough now just to pursue your meaning and purpose. This is about an investment into that aspect of you that can endure and that can continue and be given an opportunity and given a place in the next humanity on this planet. Whatever it is that you thought you were here to do, it's it's like it's coming to an end. If you haven't done it by now, then maybe the meaning and purpose of your life wasn't to do anything in those terms. Maybe the meaning and purpose in your life was only to make an investment in your immortal soul, and more importantly, to help others recognize the importance of that investment and to help them make that investment, help them make that decision to take that path and to surrender to their innermost. It's because a good many people facing destruction, facing annihilation, they're going to be doubling down on surviving as a mortal, surviving mortally, their mortal existence. And that's because they're so identified and attached to their mortal self, their mortal beloved. They love themselves too much. And they're discouraged by the thought of losing themselves, of losing their life, and losing all that they've accumulated and losing all that they've accomplished. But none of that was ever guaranteed. In fact, it was guaranteed that eventually they would lose it all. They just avoided looking at the facts. But now those facts are staring them in the face. And the clock is ticking. And they can't avoid the facts anymore. But they'll do everything in their power to try to do so in order to preserve and hold on to and cling to the success that they've had, the empire that they've built, the wealth that they've accumulated, the followers that they have amassed, or whatever the case may be. But none of that matters anymore. There's only one thing that matters, and that's awakening. Awakening and self-realization of the being. That's all that matters. Everything else, one way or another, is going to take care of itself. And your mortal well-being and your mortal survival, you leave that in your hands of the Divine Mother. You do what you need to do day in and day out, sure. But there's nothing that you can do to stop what's coming or to even mitigate it on the physical plane, no matter how hard you try. So focus instead on where your efforts can make the greatest impact and the biggest difference for you as a soul. And what is it that your meaning and purpose for existence, how does that dovetail with the times that we are living in, where it's pointless to accumulate anything? So what is it? If it's pointless to accumulate anything, is it time to give everything away? Just to let it all go. You don't have to physically give everything away. Just let it all go psychologically. Begin with that. And then the rest will take care of itself. But most importantly, to surrender. Because what's coming, we're not qualified to handle. We don't have the knowledge, the experience, the expertise. We don't have the character to be able to handle what's coming. No one does. No one does. Which is why even some of the most successful and wealthy and powerful around the world are building bunkers like rodents, digging burrows under the ground and filling those burrows with as much nuts as they can gather, in a panic to survive the winter, to survive what's coming. But they don't know what they're doing. They're turning to the smartest people, and they're trying their best, and they're turning to whatever information that they have, to whatever experts that they can find, in the hopes that they'll somehow survive. There's actually a movie. I heard about a movie that they made. I think it's in theaters right now, or it's in streaming. I wish I could remember the title of this movie. But it's about a wealthy family and their bunker, and their underground bunker. And it's about their experience after some post-apocalyptic, event, and them going through the motions of their life underground. But then and somebody shows up, like from the outside, and it disrupts their whole mechanical existence. But it's a musical, apparently. I think it's Michael Shannon, Tilda Swinton, post-apocalyptic. Okay. So here it is. If I can get this on screen. Oh, I can't. Can you guys see that? No, it's too small. It's too small poster. Anyway, so the movie is called The End, and let me see if I can find. There are some videos. I won't be able to play a video from it, because obviously that'll end up with the be getting into all kinds of trouble. Okay, so here's a supposedly a better one. Let's try that. You guys see that one a little bit better? Anyway, so that's the movie poster. Filmed by Joshua Oppenheimer. It stars Michael Shannon and Tilda Swinton. And it's a musical. The reviewers that I saw who saw it, they weren't particularly impressed by it, but the only reason I bring it up is because it's topical to what we're talking about. It's these wealthy people living in a bunker underground. That somebody would make it into a musical. I haven't seen it myself. But this is very similar to last year. Was it this year? Was it this year or last year? Netflix did that movie Leave It All Behind, the one with Julia Roberts and Ethan Hawke. And it was a limited series. It wasn't a movie, it was a series, like a little mini series. But again, it was and apocalyptic, but not like post-apocalyptic or apocalyptic. It was very contained and reduced, and it was the personal family experience of the apocalyptic event or post-apocalyptic event in the case of this film, right? So this is unique in the zeitgeist because we haven't seen stuff like this before. Just goes to show you that this is not just religious fanatics or something who are suggesting that we're in the end times or that something is coming to an end. This is a real phenomenon that is beginning to express itself in popular culture in a way that it has never done before. I mean, sure, in the 80s, we had that miniseries on TV that was about a nuclear holocaust. And we've had various different pop culture expressions, through the years, through the decades. But these kinds of things, something like this, and something like Netflix's that series Leave It All Behind, that there's something different about it. It's more down to earth. It's more, even though this is about a wealthy family, but because who else has money to build extravagant, elaborate underground bunkers, right? It's only the elite who can do that. I mean, sure, there are doomsday preppers down in the States who have very rudimentary kind of bunkers. What they do is a lot of them is they'll buy old shipping containers and convert them and bury them underground and then connect them, right? So, but they're not living in the lap of luxury down there. They're truly survivalists. Those doomsday preppers, they really are first and foremost about surviving. They're not necessarily looking to live in the lap of luxury. You can even look by this movie poster. We're talking about a underground bunker here that really is by and for elites, right? They want to try to maintain a certain semblance of their lifestyle, their luxurious living or whatever. The point that I'm making here is that when faced with death, we can have a primitive, primal, animal reaction, or we can have a enlightened, divine, transcendent response. How are we going to face what's coming? What's that acronym? Face everything and run, or face everything and rise, right? Fear, FEAR. Am I getting that right? Is that the two choices that you can face everything and rise, or face everything and run? Face everything and rise, or face everything and run. Yeah. So that's really the choice that we have when it comes to fear. Where did my that's really the choice that we have when we face the end. The end of our lives as individuals, but also the end of a humanity. Will this humanity face everything and rise, or face everything and run? And where can we run to? Run to another planet? Run to space stations in orbit? Run to Mars? Run to our islands, our remote islands and underground bunkers? Because where else can you run? And if you haven't taken the time or made the investment or you don't have the money or the time or the resources to do so, where are you going to run to? Or is it really our opportunity to rise? I encourage you to spend some time between now and the end of the year and over Christmas, understanding what Christmas is about, the birth of the innermost intimate Christ. I encourage you to not be discouraged. I encourage you to review this article on alchemical symbolism of the Nativity of Christ. But not only that, I encourage you to spend some time with this course at Glorian. It's the course on death. And there's the link, and the link is also in the chat. It's easy. You go to glorian.org, you go to learn, courses and lectures, and the title you're looking for is Death. And this is valuable enough that it's valuable to read. Preparation for transformation. Everyone will experience death. Thus, it is intelligent to prepare oneself for the experience. This course examines the truth of what happens when we die and what happens in the afterlife, or between, also known as the bardo. Most importantly, you will learn how to use today as preparation for death, and thereby transform life into a source of happiness for you and others. Death is encouraging us to transform our lives into a source of happiness for ourselves and others. The end is there so that we learn how to use today as a preparation for the inevitable, as a preparation for its arrival. And in that preparation, we transform life into a source of happiness for us and others. In this way, death is not discouraging anything. The end, the destruction, the dismantling, the loss is not discouraging in any way, shape, or form, except to the animal ego self. It's encouraging us to seek peace, joy, and happiness here and now, for however long we can have it here and now, so that when it ends, that investment into peace and happiness and joy, which is metaphysical and not of this earth, will persist and continue long after the physical is gone. And we are no longer one with this physical earth in microcosm. And as above, so below, as within, so without, as in microcosm, so in macrocosm. This is the connection between Christmas and Easter, of course. because death and birth are two sides of the same coin. And the Christ is born as the phoenix rises from the flames. And it was not too long ago that we did a live stream on that very topic. Right? We had the focus on your fire. We had the phoenix in the background. It was just a few weeks ago. November 24th, 2024. So I encourage you to spend some time meditating on death and meditating on the alchemical symbols of the nativity of the Christ, and you will see the relationship between both this course on death and this lecture by Samael Aun-Weor. Because when we talk about alchemy, we talk about the transmutation, the transformation of lead into gold. And that is precisely the transformation of a life of suffering and sadness into a life of happiness and joy that happens through death. And it's that same alchemical transmutation that happens to transmute the lead into gold, the lead of ego into the gold of the human soul. But that transmutation takes place beneath the shadow of death, the death of the false self. The false self that cares about accolades and worldly success and comfort and security and infrastructure and possessions and all the things that are man-made. That are guaranteed not to last. And that's an interesting relationship there between the end times, and that which comes at last. And isn't it interesting that we use the same word to describe something that can endure? We say it lasts. And yet the end of something is that which comes at last. It's very interesting. Language is powerful. Words have tremendous power and meaning in and of themselves. This is not our last live stream for this year. This is our second to last live stream of this year, but it was the last live stream before Christmas. The next live stream will likewise be looking forward, but in a different way. I just wanted to have an opportunity to go over the symbolism of Christmas and the relationship between Christians and what they call Christmas and the universal experience of Christmas, the worship of the Christ at this time of year, which is universal in all religions and traditions. They call it by different names, that's all. But I also wanted to take this opportunity to encourage you to make this Christmas about the birth of your own innermost intimate Christ, in the knowledge that the changes are coming and time is short and none of us know how long we have left. So though we walk in the valley of the shadow of death, we shall not fear. We shall face everything and rise, because that is what death encourages us to do. And that is what that which comes at last, and he who comes at last is here to encourage you to do. To face your fears and to face your desire for comfort and security, and rise above it all. And the only way to do that is with the assistance, with the power, with the strength of your innermost, because we mortals are not qualified to do so. We cannot do so by ourselves. So if you think that you're going to do it by yourself and you're going to rise above your fear and you're going to face everything and rise, and you're going to do that as an individual and you're going to do that as a human and so on and so forth, you are not a wise man if you think that way. Because the wise men bring their most precious gifts to pay homage to the innermost intimate Christ. The wise man gives all that he is, all that he has, to the Christ. Because only the Christ is qualified to face everything and rise. So though Christ may be born 1,000 times in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago, if he is not born within us, we are nothing. Nothing. Pointless. Meaningless. Purposeless. But because this humanity has so little time left, relatively speaking, this must be all of ours purpose, all of the meaning and purpose in life, first and foremost, must be to give our gifts to our innermost intimate Christ. And anything and everything beyond that will take care of itself, because then the Christ will work through us. But that first step, that's the step that we have to take. We have to look into the night sky and see the North Star and follow it. That one spark, that one little pinhole in the sky that's guiding us towards our destiny. And everyone's destiny is the same. The innermost intimate Christ. It's Christmas. That's everyone's destiny. What then unfolds individually, that can be different. But those are just the details. The path to destiny, the way to Bethlehem, and what we do when we get there, and recognizing that it takes place within the shadow of death, within the shadow of infanticide. In the story in the Bible, where King Herod, who fears this great king who is prophesied to be born, and he fears this great king, he fears for his kingdom, he fears for his rule. Herod is the ego. Herod is the false self. And Herod is willing to commit all sorts of atrocities just to hold on to his seat of power. And that's our ego. That's the false self. So we must seek humility. And in the manger, among the animal egos of the false self, the intimate, innermost Christ is born if we furnish him with our most precious gifts of mind, heart, and body. And if we conceive of him in sexual alchemy with our monogamous spouse by the power of the Holy Spirit, immaculate conception. And if we make of ourselves a living Christmas tree. And on Christmas Eve, when Santa Claus allegedly is coming down our chimney, meditate that night. Meditate with your lying down, with your bed bed rest facing north. You should try to orient your bed that way anyway, because that's how the electromagnetic field flows. That's how these Christic forces flow from the North Pole. So you align yourself to the North Pole and meditate on that Quetzalcoatl, meditate on that Santa Claus descending from the north, that Christic forces descending into your body, enlivening you, enlightening you. I encourage you to do all of this and read the articles that I've shared with you. And you'll be preparing yourself very well for the new year. And as I said, today is not the last live stream of the year. It's the second to last. It's the last live stream before Christmas. We will have one more live stream before 2025, and that'll be next Sunday. Does anyone have any comments or questions before we sign? It's going to be a short one today, or relatively short. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Anyway, in the meantime, I'm going to throw these articles back up. I wonder if I can do this. Yeah, I can do this. So you can have the URLs are still on screen there. Here. Again, there, okay. The URLs are here on screen. You can see them in the windows, but they're also in the chat. So if you want to cut and paste them from the chat, you can feel free to do that. I also want to take a moment and wish you and all those you love and care for a very warm and happy and peaceful Christmas. I hope that you spend your Christmas with loved ones, be they family or friends or both. Remember that this is a time of giving, of sharing, of selflessness. Remember your innermost intimate Christ. Remember your Divine Mother. And I pray that your Christmas is filled with warmth and joy and happiness, in keeping with the suffering and sacrifices that you make for the sake of others, for the sake of your purpose, for the sake of your innermost, for the sake of the path, the work, your devotion, your dedication. I pray that Christmas offers you a reprieve, some rest, some much needed downtime, and certainly some delicious food and some baked goodies and some sweets. We can remember that we have to be good to ourselves every now and then. We don't want to overindulge, but at the same time, we don't want to deny or suppress or repress just for the sake of, or just for the sake of being dogmatic. Christmas is a beautiful time of year filled with some wonderful traditions. I hope that you can be with loved ones. And if not, then I hope and pray that wherever you are and however you're celebrating the holidays, that you remember that you are not alone, and meditate on your innermost intimate Christ, the true purpose and meaning of this time of year. Because Christ can be born 1,000 times in Bethlehem, as Master Samael used to say, but unless he is born in our hearts, he is not truly alive in our lives. So, Benjamin says, thank you, sir, for today's live stream. I'm feeling a bit under the weather, but your message was truly uplifting and perfect for meditation this Christmas day. Wishing you Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Benjamin. So once again, thank you all for taking the time and spending it with us today. And for all of you and all whom you love, from the bottom of my heart, truly, Merry Christmas. I won't wish you a Happy New Year yet because there's still next week. But Merry Christmas to you and yours. God bless. And as always, inferential peace. Take care, everyone. And hope to see you again next week. Bye for now.